The 19th century in Latin America was marked by significant political, social, and economic changes. The struggle for independence from European colonial powers left the newly formed nations with the immense task of building political systems and forming national identities. During this time, two dominant ideologies, liberalism and conservatism, arose and frequently clashed, deeply influencing the region's political evolution. These ideologies presented opposing visions for governance, society, and economic development, leaving legacies that persist today. Shkesh, origins of liberalism and conservatism in Latin America. The roots of liberalism and conservatism in Latin America lie in the Enlightenment and the revolutionary movements in Europe and North America. Liberalism drew inspiration from the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity as championed during the American and French revolutions. It emphasized individual rights, secular governance, and free market economics. Liberals in Latin America aimed to modernize their societies by implementing these principles, which they believed would lead to progress. Conversely, conservatism emphasized tradition, authority, and social hierarchy. This ideology found support among elites who benefited from colonial structures, including the Catholic Church, landowners, and military leaders. Conservatives sought to maintain the established social order, advocating for strong central authority and the preservation of religious institutions. The political divide. The ideological divide between liberals and conservatives played out in debates over government structure, the role of the church, land ownership, and individual rights. These disagreements were not merely academic, but often resulted in constitutions, political conflicts, and civil wars. Government. Federalism versus centralism. Liberals generally supported federalism, advocating decentralized governance to grant autonomy to regions and provinces. This, they believed, would promote local development and diminish the power of central authorities. In contrast, conservatives preferred centralism, emphasizing strong, unified governments to ensure stability in societies prone to fragmentation. The role of the Catholic Church. One of the most contentious issues was the role of the Catholic Church. Conservatives viewed the Church as central to Latin American identity and morality, advocating for its continued control over education, social services, and governance. Liberals sought to diminish the Church's influence by promoting secular education, civil marriage, and land reforms to redistribute wealth and boost economic development. Economic policies. Liberals championed free market principles, foreign investment, and trade liberalization, seeing these as avenues to industrialize and integrate Latin America into the global economy. Conservatives, fearing these measures would destabilize traditional agrarian systems and social hierarchies, often opposed such policies. Key regional conflicts. The liberal-conservative clash fueled numerous conflicts throughout Latin America, reflecting broader tensions between modernization and tradition, as well as competing visions of nationhood. Mexico. In Mexico, the liberal-conservative divide dominated much of the 19th century. The Reform War, 1857 to 1861, showcased this conflict, with liberals, led by Benito Juarez, advocating for secular reforms and a constitutional state. Conservatives resisted these changes, defending the church and traditional privileges. Though liberals triumphed, conservative forces, with support from France, challenged their authority, leading to the French intervention and the brief reign of Emperor Maximilian I. Argentina. Argentina's conflicts often centered on the struggle between Unitarians, liberals, and Federalists, conservatives. Unitarians, based in Buenos Aires, pushed for a centralized government to drive trade and modernization. Federalists, representing rural provinces, resisted, fearing that centralized power would concentrate wealth in the capital. These divisions fueled civil wars in the mid-19th century. Colombia. In Colombia, then part of Gran Colombia, recurring battles between liberals and conservatives led to frequent leadership changes and unrest. Liberals sought to curtail the church's privileges and expand individual rights, while conservatives emphasized religious and social stability. This divide set the stage for the country's later political instability. Central America. In Central America, the liberal-conservative conflict contributed to the collapse of the United Provinces of Central America in the 1830s. Liberals envisioned a unified, secular federation while conservatives preferred strong local autonomy and the preservation of traditional institutions. This division resulted in the emergence of independent nations like Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, each grappling with internal ideological struggles. The liberal-conservative divide extended beyond politics, influencing broader social dynamics such as class, race, and regional identities. Social hierarchies and race. Conservatives often upheld the colonial-era social hierarchies that privileged European-descended elites while marginalizing indigenous and Afro-descended populations. Liberals, although advocating for equality in principle, frequently failed to address systemic racism and inequality. For many marginalized groups, liberal reforms brought little tangible change, limiting the broader appeal of liberalism. Urban versus rural. The conflict also had a distinct urban-rural dimension. Liberal ideals were typically concentrated in urban centers, where elites and intellectuals sought societal modernization. Conversely, conservative values resonated more strongly in rural areas, where traditional social structures and religious practices remained deeply rooted. Foreign influence and intervention. Foreign powers significantly influenced the liberal-conservative struggle in Latin America. European nations, particularly Britain and France, and later the United States, often backed one faction over the other, based on strategic or economic interests. For example, France supported Mexican conservatives during the French intervention to establish a monarchy aligned with European interests. Liberal leaders frequently looked to the United States as a model for republican governance and economic progress. However, U.S. interventions, especially in Central America, often undermined liberal agendas by prioritizing American economic and strategic goals over local autonomy. Outcomes and legacies. By the late 19th century, liberalism had generally emerged as the dominant ideology across much of Latin America. This shift led to the adoption of secular constitutions, land reforms, and economic modernization. However, these liberal policies often reinforced existing inequalities, as the benefits of modernization were concentrated in the hands of elites, while indigenous and working-class populations faced exploitation and displacement. Conservatism, although weakened, adapted to the changing landscape, often reasserting itself in response to liberal shortcomings. The tension between liberal and conservative values persisted well into the 20th century, shaping debates on social reform, economic policy, and the role of the state. Conclusion. The 19th century conflict between liberalism and conservatism in Latin America was not merely a political rivalry, but a profound contest over the nature of society, governance, and identity in the post-independence era. While liberals promoted modernization, individual rights, and secular governance, conservatives aimed to preserve tradition, social order, and the influence of the Catholic Church. This ideological struggle caused political instability and civil conflicts, leaving enduring legacies that continued to influence the region's political landscape. Understanding this historical conflict provides insight into the complexities of nation building and the challenge of balancing progress with tradition in Latin America.